Welcome back, everyone. This is demonstration number 2 in creating styling forms. This one is about styling. We will review a few elements of the insert menu just because we'll need to actually style things. So first of all, let me jump down. Here's where we were. I made a few changes. I realized it said $20 for the everything ticket, so I fixed my graphic there because that would have been quite the deal. If you had observant eyes in the last demo, you might have noticed that. But we have all our fields and our labels. And if we take a look at this in Google Chrome, here's what it looks like. And it's pretty messy because we haven't styled it yet. But as you recall, everything was responsive, and we just need to make it look better. That hurts my eyes to look at this. So that's where we're going to go back to cascading style sheets. Okay. So first of all, you know what? Because I want to be in the live view most of the time, and this footer is annoyingly in the way, I'm going to take that line here from my footer and not delete it, but just I'm going to comment it out so it disappears. Okay, so it's gone because it's turned it into a comment, which is for people, your coworkers, to read, or for you to read later on if you forget what you did. It doesn't show up in your browser, so we basically turned it into a comment so it disappears by just putting these dashes on it. All right, we'll turn it back on, obviously, before I give you these files so you can see it. All right, so how do we go about stylizing this? So remember, first of all, the first thing we did is on the insert menu, we were at our form stuff, and we inserted a form. And so let's start with the styling there, because the first thing is we don't actually know where our form is in its entirety. I mean, we can presume, but we want to see it. So like everything else, we'll go to the CSS designer. We'll come up to where our form starts just to make it easier to make our selector, so we don't actually have to type the word form in or whatever, or click in here anywhere to start the form. So I'm clicked on where it says form. That's our first HTML element, and then we can come over to our CSS designer. This is my demo NCSS, hit my new selector, and it's ticket form. That's how I ID'd it. I'm going to up arrow it on my keyboard, so it's just ticket form. And like we do for a lot of things when we're learning, I'm going to just go to background color and put, let's put like a gray for now, because it won't be too hideous. Tab out of that. So you can see our form. So that's super helpful. And the first thing we notice is we could also attach a class or ID to it if we wanted to. As we could with all these things, we could hit a little plus, we could make up our class over here and then hit the plus and add it. So FYI, this doesn't work any different than anything else we've learned. But back to the form for a second. Let's go ahead and give it a bit of a margin at the top just to separate it from that graphic. We should probably separate this a little bit, but that's not really this lesson, so we'll do that later. All right, and then we're ready to start dealing with some of our new elements. So first of all, note that there are new elements, like label is an HTML element that's new to us. Input, also an HTML element. And so remember, you can be super powerful by creating element selectors. Like if I wanted all these labels, like first name and last name, just to take up their own, I should have capitalized these things too to go with this. So I'll do that. If I want these to work on a block level, that means take up their own line, I can go ahead and do that. And so what I could do is, notice I have label select over here just to remind me that when I go to new selector, it'll sort of know what I want to do because I have it selected. It doesn't matter at that point. Once I start making the selector, it's going to change all the labels. So keep that in mind. there are a bunch of labels in here. They're not always just at the top. So this is probably not the selector we're going to end up using, but I want to show you that it's possible because there's other labels down at the bottom, I believe. There's zip code. There's this label for the checkboxes. So that might be an issue because those will look pretty bad if they're on a block formatting. But let's just go ahead and stick a block label formatting on here. So got my label selector, and under my display, let's pick block. All right, so that sets everything. So now first name is on its own line, last name it's on its own line, etc. And clearly I need some margin below them, so I can add some margin. Oops, I don't want the margin below the label though. I want the margin above the label. All right, so it separates them out with their components. That is so much more helpful, right? And like I mentioned, I'm going to change all these to caps to be consistent. This gray background is going to be gone, so we don't need to worry about this top margin over here. All right, what about the inputs? Okay, you can see what it did to these guys, first of all, because these are also labels. It set them to block as well. And, you know, this would be great. I would keep this if I was doing something for a mobile device. Stacking like this would be great. I mean, that's what I want. But I'm going to make a media query for that, where I can set these to block level formatting for my labels, and they'll stack up just like this. So I can make a mental note that this works to stack them up. But in this case, I don't want that to happen. So how do I avoid that? Well, you know, this element selector changes all the elements throughout. And if I want to target it a little bit better, there's two things I could do. One, you know, I could go to my single labels. It seems to want to click on my input. I could add a class to them. Let's see if we can grab a different one. You know, hitting the little plus thing, this is input. It's a little hard. I could just type it in. It seems to want to do this when I doesn't like me clicking on that, except I can do it here. Hit the little plus, I can add a class. So I could make up the class and attach it. Another thing I can do, since I already have this label selector applied, is I could make it into a descendant selector. So it just targets a certain area. But to do that, I would need some sort of section for this top part, which is easy enough to do. And I've already wrapped that in a section. So what I did is I just selected all this stuff. I'm just grabbing the name here. You know, selected it all, just like we've done all semester. And then wrapped it in the section class. You know, went to my insert, said a new section under HTML. And then when I clicked to make the section, I put wraparound selection, put the class, which in this case was personal info. So it was all wrapped. Okay, so knowing it's wrapped in this personal info section, just this top part, you can see the border right there. I could also give that a background. For this, I didn't make any rule for personal info at all. So the width and the height is completely defined by the content. It has no width, it has no background color, it has no nothing. There's no rule for it. But what it does allow me to do, knowing that it's called personal info, and in fact, I'm going to, because I'm a horrible typer, I'm going to copy that to my clipboard, is I could make a descendant selector, right? I could click on this label, and I could say, I only want the labels in my personal section. This has to have a period in front of it because it's a class. And then I need my space here. So now only my labels in my personal info will be affected. And you see the second I did that, only these things are set to block. Everything down here is untouched. Again, because these are all the ones in my section personal info. All right, so all that wrapping it in a section did was give me a way to target it more specifically. All right. Of course, that means I would probably have to do something. So let's go ahead and wrap this part because I would probably want to do something with this. So actually, you can tell I've already wrapped it in my tick section. So I could make a rule for my tick section. All right, so you can put different sections within your form, and that's totally fine. So in this case, let's go ahead and give this, just so everyone's following along, I'm going to hit the little plus, and I'm going to hit the up arrow on my keyboard just so we tick section. We'll take my tick section. It's really just these 3 inputs. And then I'll have finally a credit card section probably, which will be similar to this. And let's do something with my tick section. For this, let's go ahead and give it a background color so you guys can see it. I'm going to make it garish for a minute. Just all right. And then let's go ahead and give it a width because I want this to center, these things to center. And for this to center, I'm going to need auto margins. I'm going to need a fixed width for that to actually to happen. So I'm not sure exactly how much width I need, but I need a width that encompasses all 3 of those things. And so it looks like it's going to be about, there we go, 443 pixels. And then I just want to set my auto margins, my left and right, oops, to auto. And it goes right there in the middle. Okay, I probably also want some margin on this, oopsie, on the top. So it's not, and I probably, I could add some text in here as well within this div. If I think this is not explanatory enough, but I think it is. Okay. All right, I could even put some margin on the bottom, but when I wrap, I'm going to also do this credit card section. I can wrap that and finally do the form. All right, but since we've done the wrapping already for the first 2 sections, we're going to just go skip this section because it's going to look a little bit like this one. Essentially, it's the same thing. They're all like select menus. These are all select menus. And actually, yes, there's, oh, wait, this is a text input right here. So this is text, select, and select in terms of the form elements in my insert menu. Okay. All right, so how about these guys? Let's also take a look at these. These are text fields, and like I said, one of the other ways, so I have now, I have 2 options here. If I want to do my inputs, I can do a selector, and this one is probably not the thing I want to use here, because these all have different names, and I don't want to go about this individually. So I could just do what I've done up here, where I have a label and just do the same idea with input here. So because I want to change the input. So if I want to do all the inputs all the way through, I can just put input. If I want to just do the inputs in the top section, then it's going to need this section, which is personal info. So dot personal info, case sensitive space, and now it should work out. So let's do something pretty straightforward. Oops, pull this guy back up. And let's just make the width 100%. Okay, clearly we did something wrong. It's probably my spelling. Yes, I forgot my L. And my A. person info. Personal. It's almost always spelling. Okay, there we go. Let's pull this back. You know, we can make them 100% or something like that. It's going to be actually less than 100% because it's just some margins, so 99%. Important thing is it just did the top ones. That is what I wanted. This is not an input. This is a dropdown. So I also have just for the states in there. I didn't want to type them all out. I started, remember that song? Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Connecticut, that you learned when you were like 6. I could type them all out based on that song, which I still remember. But you can also, if you just Google list of states for drop-down menu, they will give you the code and you can cut and paste it, which is what I would do. You don't need to, like, this is not a typing exercise for this assignment, so you know, if you don't want to type them all, but you can actually just do that, and there's little websites that have all these kind of form data fields already filled out for you, so you can just simply cut and paste that part, because if you just look at it, if I scroll down, these are all just options with a value. So, you know, if you really like to type, you can copy and paste this and just change the value to the state abbreviation and the state if you wanted to, but you can find this whole group, all 50 states, you know, if you just Google it. Okay. Or you can just find another form that you have to fill this out, because there's all kinds of forms basically everywhere where you put the state in, and just do view source in your browser and then cut and paste it from there. You know, there's all kinds of forms everywhere that you can do that with. Okay, if you find one you like. Just, let's see, what else can we work with here that's new? So note when you know these inputs, you can even have a type for that if you wanted to do things like that. So for like these inputs, if you wanted to have like a specific type that they're typing in, maybe even just a text color. Let's just do a text color so you can see it. I'm not sure if this will actually work in let's do preview and see. That's not green. What did I do wrong? Oh, why did I pick black? I thought I picked green. That would explain a lot. Okay, there it's green. Oh, okay. So you know you can stylize this in very, very specific ways. Okay, but important parts are, you know, the basics, margins, and that sort of thing. And again, this is not going to be cramped up to this edge because I'm not going to use this gray background. This background, you know what? I think now everyone, we can take this form background color off so that it looks prettier. And you know what? We could even take this section's background off, my tick section. I'm just going to null it out for now, comment it out, because we need to turn it back on. Okay, oh, this one's a little special. So we can go to that. This is our submit button. It already has a name because under the properties inspector, remember we had this open when we assembled this whole thing, and I added my submit button. I added this, there's a thank you HTML listed under my form. It's also listed under my submit button just because, just to cover me. The value is get my tickets. I changed that a little bit. But the title is submit button and the name is submit button. So I have a bunch of stuff already filled in about this. So I have a bunch of options when I fill this out. It also has this idea of submit button, so I would probably use that. So I could do something like, you know, make a selector. This probably should be the last thing, so I'll drag it down to the bottom in the end here. But for now, we'll just keep it here. No, we'll just drag it down, just like I said. Okay, submit button. We could say, let's give it a width. Well, first of all, we should set it. I don't think that sometimes if you've noticed the width doesn't work, it's because it needs to be set to block. But we'll see what happens here. It's working, because you can see. And then maybe for the margins, we can, let me pull this guy up a little bit. Okay, we are on the submit button, just so you know. Let's do the same thing where I take my my left margin and set it to auto, and my right margin and set it to auto. Good, Jeff. Click on the units. And see if that sets it, but it doesn't. That is because, let's try this. Let's set it also to block. There we go. It didn't know it needed to occupy the whole line. That's why it wasn't centering. But when you tell it you need to occupy the whole line and then you give it auto margins, it works. So a lot of times this display thing is pretty key to how things show up on the screen. So I gave it an auto left margin, auto right margin, and I gave it a width. I could give it a background color if I wanted to. That might be actually kind of interesting in here. Something that will complement my orange. Everything is like white, orange, gray. So the white would work, but let's just do like a gray. Actually, let's take this gray right here. And probably do the text white now that I'm thinking about it. Okay. Oh, and then obvious other things that we could do with this. We haven't formatted this section yet, so that might have some padding or margin. So probably instead of chasing my tail, I should save formatting this for last. But since we've already set it to block, I'm going to ignore my own advice and go ahead and put a little wee bit margin on the top of that to move it down some, so it's not all cramped up there. Like a little space makes everything a lot better. Okay, I believe that is enough. You have different options, just like everything else. You can wrap things in sections if you want to do a compound selector or a descendant selector, like we did here with the input. You can simply select items like you normally do and hit the little plus and add a class to them that you've already made up. Over here, it'll show up in your drop-down menu. Like, let's say I wanted this input to, let's just go ahead and do that once, because I guess we haven't actually done that. But keep in mind, always with selectors, you can always just say, I want to make up a selector called input button. Okay, so it's just called input button, and input button will have like a green background, just so we can see if this is working. Okay, so this input button selector doesn't do anything just yet. It's a class selector, but I can go over here and I can say input button, and I can see what happens. Actually, I don't know if this is actually going to work for. Let's do something else. Let's add a few things to input button. Like, I don't think a font would work in there either. Let's see if we can change the width of it. This might be one of those things that we can't really modify now that I think about it, but let's see what happens here. We can make it wider. Nope. All right, let's take my input button and apply it to something else. I'm going to take it off of this guy. We're going to let's see if it even put it on there. It did put class input button in there. I'm going to take that out. And you can see probably I could have used this ID ticket options thing maybe. Because it's, what those are 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that would mean we'd have to make a bunch of different classes. Let's try it. Let's see if I can grab this label. Let's just do this label. let's add to the label. This should give it a green background because I have this input button. I could call it input button label. It doesn't really matter what I call it, but let's just add it here. Input button. Okay, there we go. I can override that if I want to. So if I want to be super specific, I can always take an input. I can always mix up a class selector, or if I want to apply it to a bunch of things, it should be a class selector. So I could apply it to, if I wanted to put it on any one of these, I just hit the little plus, start typing period input, and it'll hint, and I can add it. All right, so I can do that as well. If I don't feel like wrapping everything, I can go through individually with 4 or 5 different classes for different things and apply them as I go. And keep in mind, all that does when you do things like this is write a tiny little bit of code for it, so that your input button would actually just have a class listed with it. And that's all it needs to do. So it's right here with the label because I applied it to the label, so it says class equals input button. So if you like to type, you can, but I'm not going to recommend that because it's so much easier just to click the little plus and start typing it and have it auto hit for you. Okay, that's all. Good luck. I will supply all these files on Canvas so that you can play with them and you can reference the code. All right, that is all.